You're protected from.
Nope.
So as people are straggling in, we were just having a conversation about being too woke, right? Do you know that kind of urban term woke means, awakening, social responsibility,
Remember the 4 generations.
The 4 generations, right? So there's this concept called woke, and it's when you're enlightened. It would be the same as kind of enlightened or whatever. And a supervisor overheard a conversation. He said, and they were talking about just something random. They were talking about something random, and the supervisor came up to them and was like, guys, you probably shouldn't be talking about that because ... And it caused this big uproar, and they came to me. He said, Andre, what should I do? I said, look, there's 2 principles I live by. One, I don't address instances, but I do address patterns, right? So I said, supervisor, if you see this as a pattern, he said, okay, because they were like, now we can't even talk about hamburgers or whatever. So they had totally trivialized it. It was funnier in my head. I'm going to step off stage right now.
I'll give you stage back soon. Okay, now let's talk about leadership adaptability. And then to start with, pull up your booklet D and page 3 again. And we have 3 minor, I call this scenarios. I want to go through it quickly. Let's talk about it. Just 1 minute. Okay, does anyone or has anyone here been in a position that you have been getting all the compliments about your management as a good leader, and then one day your supervisor informed you, well, you know what, someone complained about your micromanagement. Maybe not, none of us have encountered that, but that's a possibility that could happen. My first question is, what do you think that caused this kind of a I call it this equilibrium happen? Why there's such a situation could happen, even though it haven't happened to any one of you, but it could happen. What do you think that's the reason? Somebody complain all of a sudden.
Could be changes in expectations for leaders.
Okay, changes in expectation. What else? Another possibility.
Might be you just never worked with a team member who felt that way before, had a different style than yours.
Yes, right. Or you might have someone who has been quiet. It just does not want to mention it until, well, no, you know what, I couldn't do this. I have to tell, right? Or there's new team members join from different team, join your team, and what have. Now let's go to 3. You saw that everyone was happy with their workload, right? Doing well, but then another workload, okay, doing well, but then someone says, well, I'm so frustrated with this pigeonhole assignment. Again, can be all the causes we mentioned just now. Now, the middle one, that's really a kind of a real case, kind of, at Mail. We gather this case from by the Office of DNI, right? Have you heard something like that? Well, it's not exactly, but similar. Yeah, something like it, right? Now, when you heard about this as a leader, frontline leaders, how would you respond to it? What is your first thought when you heard about this kind of whispering? Do you want to say, oh my gosh, I got a bunch of whiners, right? Just go back to your work. Do you want to think about that way? what would be the ideal way to approach this kind of situation? Any suggestions?
Just trying to share and dialogue with your staff that cultural competency is everyone's responsibility.
Yes, very good. So clear, transparent communication. Now remember, any changes that happens, there, even all the people sitting in the same room, if we have something, all of this, something new, something changes, I bet everybody has quite a different responses to it, right? So how would you bring your team to the same page? Now remember, this kind of training, big corporations everywhere, they're required. You got to know what's going on, right? As a leader, your efforts is not to think about, oh my gosh, they are just so hard to manage. No, that's not your leadership style. What you need to do is, how would I help them to understand the big situation? What can I do? I have to understand read their emotions, right? Remember, compassionate leadership style. Okay, so now, when I talk about leadership adaptability, so actually we mentioned, that means leadership adaptability is related to what? The changes, right? Uncertainties and even challenges, right? So this is the definition, flexible way of thinking. Agile, cognitive approach. You need to shift and adjust your leadership style in order to deal with all kinds of situations. Now, I'm going to cover a little bit about big picture again. Changes, disruptions. Now, you probably already know, okay, in the whole business landscape, we know, okay, Apple is disrupting music and consumer electronics, right? Amazon is what? Changing retail industry. Just this morning I read news. Amazon is trying to do what? 4-hour delivery, same day delivery. No, they want to do it 4 or 5 hours delivery. What are they going to do? They open up their the warehouse, move them close to cities, right? Make it ready. Constantly innovate, thinking. Now, Apple, Amazon, I'm going to mention Airbnb, changing accommodation industry, right? And also 3D printing. It changes the whole manufacture from, manufacture impacts the aerospace to even healthcare. What's the big winning tickets? They can quickly customize their products to meet the market's needs. And the another thing, I'm not sure you heard about, there's a new rising star called Tillable. Heard about it? Tillable, Tillable. This is adopt the same Airbnb business model. They set up online platform, let the landowners with farmland to lend their farms to people who are interested to lend them. So all the transactions can be done online. And this is NPR, I think 2 days ago, I was driving to my work and heard about it, okay. And this company started in 2017, but now it's get the attention of news media. So that's about the big disruptors, to name a few. But now talk about, we are Mayo Clinic, healthcare. We have some big disruptors there too. You probably heard about those. Apple, Amazon, Walgreens, JP Morgan. Those are not healthcare organizations, but now they are entering healthcare delivery markets. A good example, Walgreens is teaming up with Humana to set up, they called healthcare delivery clinic in some selected Walgreens stores. Now, their intention is not to treat patients with immediate or acute disease, their intention is to establish long-term relations with patients with chronic conditions. That's healthcare disruptors. Now, the other things, the changes, uncertainty, I mean, I'm sure we have tools changing, updating on, I want to say daily basis, on an annual basis, not exaggerating. You probably got your 365 updates, right? We have Epic there, the platforms. Now, another big thing I want to draw us attention to is this employer and employee relation. We call it reverse. What do I mean? You probably heard about doctor-patient's relation reverse. Patients wants to choose where to go, how I want the treatment, stuff like that. Now, employer and employee. Employee wants what? They want career development. I mentioned those. They want to, this is the key, taking ownership. By that I mean they want to be responsible to execute assignments or tasks with minimum interference, or called micromanagement. Okay, so all those, okay, I mean certainly particular meeting we call the millennials. They want to work for organizations. They provide them the opportunity to grow, right? You heard about the gig economy, stuff like those. So all those uncertainty, complexity, disruptions, changes, that requires leaders to do something, to be adaptable. So those are the things with the, we call the global employment, with the mobile in place, workplace, right? We have challenges. Does the one size fits all? Does it management style works? No. Now we also have workflow management. What do I mean? With the mobile workplace, now people can work anywhere with people from different cultures. You do definitely have the challenges to workflow management because you want to make sure everybody on the same page, even though they are in different locations. And the last one, challenges, I mean, I'll mention a few. If you have a we call the global team, people from quite different cultural backgrounds, when they mingle together, you want to ensure equity and inclusion. That's going to be a challenge. Now, what I'm going to say is go into details. Okay, you talk about all those big stuff, right? How should I get there? How do we become adaptable leaders? We feel you need those three things. First is adapt to business environments with entrepreneur spirit. What I'm talking about is really taking calculated risks, doing something unorthodox, unconventional. This is really regarding, I mean, I'm going to use Uber as an example. Uber's business model. All it needs to do is set up just a website with low cost, then connecting thousands of potential drivers to its services. What it achieves, zero cost marginal benefits without buying cars, hiring new employees, right? Well, any new business has risks, but you've got to be really taking risks and doing something uncommon, unconventional. Now, focus on the moments and the results. Well, in corporations, we still have a ranking system in place, for sure, right? But today, how would you manage your talents, manage people, and try to achieve the best results? Give one example. You know, at Oracle, the co-founder, I forgot his name. He helped his one of the receptionists, Nick Sally, to learn computer programming. And then she went on to take on some management positions in the internal, called customer relationship department. Later, she started internal sales operation of department. Now it's a multi-million-dollar business. So what I want to emphasize is, in today's workforce, if you want to really mobilize to best use everybody's talents, try to discover the true value of each individual. Treat them, like I mentioned before, as true valued partners. How to use them, discover their talents. The last one, being able to read the emotions of any situation. This is really something I'm talking about, high EQ. The example I want to share, interesting, I think it happened last year, right? 2 African Americans in Starbucks got arrested, even though they committed no crimes, right? As soon as it happened, think about today's social medias. It's everywhere. Medias, news, TV news, whatever. That story so out of control. And now is a CEO since this is really a big damage to public relations. Here's how he dealt with it. He started by genuinely apologizing. Now, company first issued an apology on Twitter, and then is a CEO released a personal statement calling the situation reprehensible outcome. Now, second, he admitted fault. He took the ownership. He started by saying, okay, our company's training and practice have led to this bad outcome. We stand firmly against discrimination and racial profiling. Now, our company is responsible. I am accountable. Very powerful statement. Look at the news. Okay. And the third step he took, he did some action. He says, we will do everything to improve, and our company will be better for this. And then what he did, and he connected over the phone with the mayor, the police commissioner, the leaders in the community, and he met 2 gentlemen in person. And I think it's 2 weeks later, he asked the company, it's a Friday afternoon or Thursday afternoon, closed over 80,000 of location. Have all the employees took a half-day racial profile training program to prevent it from ever happening again, right? You know, some news media, they call this very, very powerful, great leadership style in handling the crisis. And this guy is able to read emotions of situation and take actions for positive. And he did something to control the whole situation, right? So what adaptability you need, I'm certainly talking about the big things here. Well, those are the kind of leadership pattern we want to form. So what should I do? Those are the steps we need to do, and I'm not going to go details. I think I almost run out of my time. Sorry about it. Go ahead.
No, it's good. It's good. It's good. How are we doing? We opened up the fire hose, and this is a lot of information, and so just recognize that in the future we'll continue to do these sessions, but each of these handouts will be its own session. So if you have leaders or people that you think a particular unit might be helpful for, that's the plan moving forward. So let's move. We're going to talk a little bit about unconscious bias. So someone said, Andre, we have an unconscious bias unit. We've already done unconscious bias. And I said, yes, and I hope you brushed your teeth this morning. Because I'm sure you've brushed your teeth once. And that's probably not enough, right? So one, unconscious bias training doesn't get us to a place where we can say that we've accomplished it. And so I want to spend a little time talking about unconscious bias in some unique and different ways. And I've given a precursor to some of my my arguments or my the statements I want to defend as we move forward. But I want to read this this piece on page 2. Right? You thought you were leading in a cohesive team. However, Marcia, a new member, brings in perspectives and unique approaches that seem to add complexity to the team. You are a bit concerned about the situation. On a couple of occasions, she has challenged the way things have historically been done, which made some members quite uncomfortable. And a few times at team meetings, she spoke her mind, but some saw that as discounting old ways of doing things. Her thoughts and ideas were innovative and outside the box, which upset some individuals. Plus, her strong accent made it hard for some team members to understand her. Some members felt uncomfortable with her new innovative and disruptive behaviors, while others on the team thought it was good to hear fresh perspectives, new ideas, and to think differently. Does this sound like a realistic situation? Right? How has that been dealt with in realistic terms? How have you seen some situations like this dealt with? They weren't dealt with? Okay, so a lot of people are saying they just weren't dealt with. What was the result of not dealing with them?
See, Marcia go silent and leave.
So Marcia goes silent and leave.
And things just fester.
Other things just fester.
The group becomes divided.
The group becomes divided. How else have people seen this?
So when it is dealt with in an open discussion of why we did things differently in the past, but how there might be new ideas, and having a discussion where everyone's bringing potential new ideas to the table, it can turn out very well.
It can turn out very well. What is the problem?
It's challenging people to think differently when they don't really want to.
So people don't want to think differently, and Marcia is challenging the status quo. They like it the way it is.
Change is hard.
Change is hard. So who becomes the problem? So we just said what the problem is. Who becomes the problem? Marcia. Marcia becomes the problem. And so if we don't become conscious of the biases that our organizations or our work groups have, then we misidentify what the real problem is. The real problem isn't Marcia, it's change. And so as a leader, I have to recognize that people have these types of unconscious bias, right? So let's go back to page 2. So you see those two diagrams, diagram A and diagram B. Which appeals to you more, diagram A or diagram B?
A, of course.
A. Most people say A. Why is that? Because it's symmetrical. Because it looks familiar. And what does letter A form? What is that configuration forms a what?
Square.
A square. Is a square really there?
No.
No, but it forms something that we're familiar with. We like it. We appreciate that. That is our affinity. Now, if I was to look at these two if I was to look at these two shapes, do these shapes have the same characteristics?
Yes.
What are those characteristics? There are 4 Pac-Man in each side, right? Somebody said a pie. So there's 4 Pac-Man. So is it possible that I can look at a resume with my affinity bias and it have the same as another resume that I'm not familiar with and actually make a bad judgment because they're both the same? So that's that right fit bias that I want us to be conscious of, the fit bias, that it has to fit me, it has to look like me, but when in fact it may not necessarily fit like me. If we look at all the other principles that we've gotten to before we get here, it suggests that the future may not look like me. My organization may not look like it. It is so profound to me that this bold forward movement, right? So we're looking at, so I moved to Rochester to work here, and now they're telling me that I can work anywhere but Rochester. But now my kid is in school and I'm here now. I'm a community member, right? But just 5 years ago, that would be anybody ever have a supervisor that was looking at you, looking how long you sat in your seat to tell how well you were doing at your job, right? I don't see you at your desk, So those are things, right? So it's important to recognize that, and that right fit bias also is shadowed by the double standard bias. That things that look familiar to me are the things that are good and acceptable, but the things that are foreign to me or different configuration, I don't like that, right? So we think about men and women. The words that are used for men for leadership, if you try to apply those in most general senses outside of this particular context, those words would come out actually to be a negative for women, right? So when you think about that's that double standard bias. And then on page 3, there's this notion of the in group and the out group. And when I think about in groups and I think about out groups, I think about the in group being the group that has the most influence, the most power, typically the largest size. In your K-12 experiences, whether you're in the United States or outside of the United States, how were athletes treated in your K-12 elementary school setting? How were athletes treated? Heroes, pretty good, right? They were oftentimes referred to as the in group. How did and it depends on where you went to school, either in the States or outside of the States, but how was the band treated in relationship to the sports team?
It's called the nerd herd.
It was called the nerd herd, right? Or whatnot, right? So there's the in group and that out group. Do we have? So we certainly have in groups and out groups in our own organization, right? So in groups, in most meetings, what group of people, either introverts or extroverts, get the most either airtime or people see as the most leader-like? Extroverts, right? So that would be the in group, and the out group would be the introverts, right? When we know that looking at introverts and extroverts, they both can be positive, powerful leaders, but that leadership looks different, right? And so if we have to recognize our unconscious bias around what leadership looks like, what those formations are like. Is it an in-group or out group? So what are some of the thoughts and ideas of in-group members? What does the in-group think about itself?
They do things the right way.
That they do things right way. Why? Because they're the biggest group. They're the leader, right? They're the bigger group. How do they behave? Sometimes it's confident. What happens when the confidence becomes too much? It's arrogance, right? So the in group can sometimes they can be confident, but when it's overplayed, it can be arrogant. What else can the in group be? How do they behave? Are they inclusive or exclusive?
Yes.
Typically they're exclusive because the pie is only so big. But how many people know life is not pie? Right? Yeah, life is not pie. So what are some of the thoughts of the out group?
Disrespect.
So they feel disrespected.
Don't matter.
That they don't matter.
Unheard.
That they feel unheard. So what are some of their behaviors as a result of that?
Apathy.
Sometimes it's apathy. I already see how the game is played. I'm just not going to do anything. I already know that the extroverts are going to get all the attention. I know that they're looking for squares they're looking for, Pac-Man that forms squares. I can't even do that, right? So that apathy. What is the job of a responsible leader? It is to look at the in-group and the out-group and make a larger circle for both of them. So when we talk about this unconscious bias, on the back of page 4, can you cue up the video for me? On the back, page 4, we have the ducks. And what would happen if the yellow duck is experiencing this on a day-to-day basis? What do you think would happen to his motivation over time? Does it go up? He said, I'm just going to try one more time. Yes! Right? At some point, he decides to acquiesce to the situation that he finds himself in. Right? So, to that, I'm going to play a short video that talks really about how this unconscious bias can play in our hiring decisions.
Better or working differently to enhance and maximize everyone's full potential. As a byproduct, they become yet another means of helping everyone on your team feel included and valued. It's not enough for this exchange to occur just once a year. The right time is any time that one party or the other feels it is necessary and appropriate. As opposed to a non-inclusive boss, a true inclusive leader will always have an open door. Unfortunately, performance reviews are inherently subjective and thereby prone to the ubiquitous influences of unconscious biases. Now let's face it, very often different leaders would reach different conclusions and give different evaluations for the exact same individual. We've all witnessed this. Feedback, especially when anonymous, is fraught with subjectivity. Ulterior motives and personal vendettas are often baked in and not always overlooked. An evaluator's self-interests, personal preferences, and myriad agendas cannot be dismissed. Determinants are often based on compatibility of styles rather than objective performance benchmarks. We all have different strengths, weaknesses, as well as functions within our organizational units. The leader is accountable to draw these out to help develop the best possible team so that all colleagues are ultimately working toward common goals. We've probably all noticed, or at least suspected, that if the boss likes you, you get a complimentary review regardless of your foibles. Certain people just seem to get away with more, while others are critiqued more. For example, trips may get approved more often and more automatically for some, while for others, similar requests are painstakingly scrutinized down to the very last detail. The fact that some people walk around with halos on and others with horns makes a compelling argument for a universal scorecard, standardized checklists, and objective metrics. Since bosses are often the sole umpires calling the balls and strikes, transparency demands that their strike zone is consistent. Unconscious bias is everywhere, but it is our responsibility to never stop fighting it.
Thoughts, comments, observations. Fighting unconscious bias. I wouldn't choose those words because I'm somewhat of a pacifist, but it is something that we have to be consistently mindful of. We have to practice focusing on so that it does not become a problem. Anyone have blind spots on your car? Come on, JP. Blind spots on your car, right? Is that your fault? I would suggest that it's not. You weren't on the design team for your car, but it is your responsibility. So it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. So, JP.
Okay, the last section, creating sense of belonging. You probably have heard creating sense of belonging has become a really hot buzzword in across industries. Now, some corporations have created leadership role they call the manager of diversity, inclusion, belonging. Or they have a vice chair, they call the global cultural belonging, all this leadership role there. What does that mean to us? So let's start with this I'm going to talk about common sense. As a human, as social creatures, we all need to connect, to be associated with a certain group. We want to affiliate it to a certain group, right? The reason, that's why the Facebook, the Twitter, those are such a popular media. You use them, your smartphone. I joked about this. I said, if I left my purse in my office, and I got home, I found, I left my purse in my office, that's okay, I will get it tomorrow. However, if I left my phone in my office, I'm going to drive back and get it, because I just couldn't go without my phone, right? You want to read the news, you want to connect with your people. When you want to connect with people, you want to get acceptance, you get attention, you get support, and you want to give the same thing to them, right? Now, when we talk about, that's the kind of definition, whatever. Now, when we talk about creating a sense of belonging, we want to use this Maslow's hierarchy of the needs to understand why human being needs that. Probably a lot of you are familiar with that. We start with, right? Human being needs to survive. We want the food, we want water and sleep. Yes, basic, right? You'd better give me this before I think about something else. And then certainly, you want the safety, you want the shelter, right? Safety to do the stuff you want. Also safety here including both physical, also financial safety, right? If you don't have any budgets or money, you couldn't do anything, right? That's something. Now, in the middle level, the original word used love and belongings. That's the big human nature, the part we want. We all want love and belongings. Now, for this course, we replaced the word love with allophilia. Okay, probably you heard about this word. Allophilia here means you like somebody who is different from you. So, social, community, team, and family, right? You want to mingle with those, and you want to get acceptance, get your support. Now, after that, we are talking about more self-respect, esteem, and recognition, achievements, and the top one is really self-actualizations. Now, one thing, when we come to work, we say the workplace is a big source of achieving self-realization, also self-respect. Don't you think so? Yes. We share our common purpose. We share space with people. We want to mingle, interact with people, and then we do a good job, and we want people recognize the value of our work. And then you have this sense of achievements, and then self-actualization. That's what we want. Every human being is the same in this area. Now, pull up this. This is F, the last one, and also page 3. We have 3 cases. 1 minute. Now go through it quickly, and then we'll talk about it. Have a little discussion about it. Again, are those scenarios, cases familiar or not? Yeah, some of you. The first one, actually, I heard that story shared with me 4 or 5 years ago. And actually, I helped that leader make a video there. It's a real case, right? Again, now if someone on your team complain about, okay, I don't feel valued. Why small things like cancel the meetings? What would you think about it? How would you react to it? One possibility is, oh, you know what? As a manager, as a supervisor, as a frontline leaders, they are so busy, right? Cancel meetings, such a natural thing, right? I mean, they're so busy, don't have time. But look at the patterns. And also you have to put yourself in others' shoes. Why that person think about that way? Now the second one, this guy shares ideas. Constantly, well, thank you, appreciate it, yeah. Do you notice something happen there? And then nothing follow up. And then if it's put in someone else's mouth, some different persons might be used or something. Heard about those kind of stories? And the last one. And actually, if you have taken is that online, is that stereotyping thread? Something like that, right? Remember Williams' case? It's something similar to this. When his research paper is out, some people simply focus on finding all the fault. Was something wrong, whatever, right? Instead of focusing on positive part. Okay, how you make those people feel about. So creating sense of belonging, I'm going to talk about these two things. One is really how to really apply truly human leadership and create a safe, inclusive environment. I want to talk a little bit about this book with an example here. You heard about Bob Chapman, right? If you probably read the book, I'm going to repeat myself. Everybody matters there. How did he start this leadership style? In the 1990s, his company was busy acquiring different companies there. So as the work, in the morning when the new employees come to work, they look tired, they're drained, and their energy seems drained. So he starts thinking about how could I make this working environment or make the work fun. Then this is really reflective leaders. This book contains a lot of good stories. When he went to the church and he was starting thinking about his leadership style. So what he started thinking about, okay, those employees are really the precious children of their parents who trusted me can give them a good life and work experiences. So he compared this good parenting and good leaderships are both about taking care of people. So as parents, you want them to be safe, protected, feel fulfilled. Now as a leader, you want to do that as well. Okay. So very impressive, I think it's shared somewhere in YouTube and a lot of places. I want to share this story. So the company, I think it's the 90s, late 90s, whatever. The company all of a sudden lost over 30% of orders due to economic recessions. So the company board and the company CEO, Bob Chapman, got together. What they are talking about? Layoff, right? Layoff workers. But at the meeting, Bob Chapman refused to let any single employee to go. Now instead, he proposed a furlough program. So every employee is required to take 4 weeks unpaid vacations. Now, here is his powerful message there. When he released the program, he says it's better we all suffer a little than any one of us suffer a lot, should have to suffer a lot. Now, when the program was out, think about the results. Imagine the employees' morale went up. In short time period, they saved over $20 million. Now, when the employees feel protected, safe in that environment, you know what happens? They have a trust and great collaboration. They have this camaraderie and also the sympathy for each other. One example is now some employees who could afford to take a longer unpaid vacation time would trade with those who could afford less. Another example is some employee volunteered to come into work during their unpaid vacation time because they say, okay, that's the only way we want to express our gratitude. Okay, so think about sense of belonging. So we talk about how to engage people, how to make people committed to work. When you have this sense of belonging in that environment, that will be formed. I like to end this section with this. You probably are familiar with Simon Sinek, very good speaker, YouTube, a lot of good stuff. What I love about this is the things that makes us love our job is not what we do, but the way we feel when we go there. So when we feel protected and feel safe, fulfilled, we want to and we feel that someone wants us to achieve more and is giving us the opportunity to prove to them and to ourselves that we can do it. The sense of belonging, sense of fulfillment.
Yeah, and what do we call that here at Mega? So what is the result of this sense of belonging? What do we call it? It's a 3-letter word. Starts with J and ends in Oi. We call it joy, right? So I don't know if anybody else who heard that when Dr. Ferrugia or Dr. Jean-Rico said, you know, we're going to introduce joy into the workplace, and people went, huh? What? Joy? The results of building or creating this is joy. And it has to be made. Anyone driven through St. Paul? Do those streets make sense? No. They do not. You know why? Because it wasn't planned. But you drive in Minneapolis. As long as you know where you are in Minneapolis, you know that the streets are numbered and then they're alphabetical the other way because that was planned. And so if we're going to have if we're going to have inclusive leaders, it's going to have to be you. It's going to be your hands on the plow that actually make that happen. And not with your words, but with your life. With your life. Act as an inclusive leader. Think as an inclusive leader. Speak as an inclusive leader. And all of these principles that we're talking about will follow you. They'll manifest as you go forward with the cognition that you're going to practice this until you get it. You're going to practice this until you get it. And so with that, I wish you joy as you go through the rest of your day. Any questions, comments, observations? We have like 3 minutes. Yes?
Do you have any good resources to teach about unconscious bias? I think I'd like to learn about what mine are and, you know, to try to manage those.
Certainly. So there is do any of you have resources before I spill the beans? Because you're just as smart as I am.
This is like a website of Harvard or was I too?
Yep, so the Harvard Implicit Association Test, or the AIT, if you typed in that in Google, just Harvard, comma, AIT, that'll come up. That is a resource. There's a book that we also use here, Blind Spot. There's also Vivaldi's, Whistling Vivaldi is another great, so I'm rattling these off, but send me an email and I'll send them to you.
Thank you.
Right. Any other questions, comments, observations? I so want to thank you for your time. It's valuable and you spent it with us. So I'll give you back your 2 minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, by the way, you might get kind of evaluation. Only 3 simple questions. I hope you can do it and help us to improve. Thank you.
Andre, what's your last name?
Koen. Last name is Koen. I should be the only one.
Nice job, you're good.
Oh, good. Thank you. Where do you work? Oh, sweet. So, who's your...
Adam Briggs is Chief Compliance Officer.
Okay.
Monty, Chief
Okay,
Risk
Kim.
Officer.
Yep. I was just with Kim yesterday, so, yeah, she's good, folks. So, spread the word. We want to keep doing this session. And, if you found it useful, tell us.
I went outside too with no jacket on. I actually called it.
Spread the word.
All right, thank you.
So thank you so much. So I been doing harbors. I worked in Sylvia Ballers for a while with education and Barbara Bird. So I know she reached out to you to have you come to one of our sessions. I'm just like, I know you sign up for stuff like this. You do such a great job, so I appreciate it a lot. So have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That whole team. It's a mess. I knew that.
But it's a good news.
Thank you so much.
The fact that you're welcome to but it's the people who don't.
I know.
The tip is dead. So the fact that you want to, you're going to, even if you never use any of those resources, because you're thinking about your life. And that's what's supposed to say.
Oh, that's so kind of you.
Yeah, no.
Kind and motivating and encouraging. You guys did a really great job, though.
Oh, thank you so much.
As a way of that's summarizing. So you already have it in your methodology or recognizing stuff. What about recognizing
Oh, thank you very much. That was yeah,
really good.
What was your name again? JP.
Last name after the infection.
Thank you very much. That was very nice. We, in our department there, we have this Joy project, and they applied and got funding for a lot of joy in our department. And one that sort of fits in this in a way for promoting feelings of belonging is they did a pre and post survey of, I don't know, for like people on or whatever. And then they have a website with a form you fill out where you recognize a colleague specifically for doing something that fits with one of the values or whatever they are, rich ties, that one.
Yeah.
And so,
legal department, right?
what?
Is that from legal?
No, it's professionalism maybe, or the Mayo model of care, maybe?
Yeah.
Maybe it's that Mayo model of care, I'm not sure. But, so it's over a discrete period of time, and then you get points. Also, everybody's going to win no matter how many points you have. So there's some fair and unfair things.
Yeah.
And so, and then they're going to do a post period of time, whether your joy increased, I don't think they're calling it joy, but anyway, something like that. Whether you felt recognized, but just I thought I'd share that with you. But one of the things in our department is it's big and far flung, and there tend to be feelings of unfairness about people in the other campuses. And so I've always thought, we should like make your annual review element that you should have to report how you advance the career of someone in another campus. Or, you know what I mean? Yeah. So a lot of people like to compete and they want to get their chits, I did this good thing. And so it's not built, fairness and